The night was unusually quiet. In Ouagadougou, too quiet. Inside the presidential residence, Captain Ibrahim Traoré sat at the long oak table of the War Council room, reviewing reports from the northern border. His fingers traced over the maps, while his eyes scanned casualty numbers and intercepted communications. But as he lifted the glass of mint tea brought to him moments earlier, something felt off, not in the taste, but in the silence that followed. 30 minutes later, his vision began to blur. His pulse slowed. His breath became shallow. He stood up abruptly, staggered for a moment, and then collapsed to one knee. His guards rushed in. Commandant Ouattara, the man known as his shadow, was the first to react, lifting him as he barked orders for the medical team. No gunfire, no explosion, just a silent fall that triggered a national lockdown. Within the hour, the presidential palace was sealed, internal security scrambled, and a single phrase echoed through encrypted comms. "The captain has fallen." What few knew at that moment was that Traoré hadn't suffered a heart attack. He had been poisoned. The tea, delivered by a trusted aide, had been laced with a neurotoxin rare enough to avoid standard detection, but potent enough to kill within hours. Emergency treatment stabilized him, but he remained unconscious for the next 16 hours. During that time, the state nearly fractured. The military chain of command froze, unsure whether to act or wait. Rumors exploded across intelligence channels, some claiming it was the French, others blaming ISIS-linked factions, but the truth was far more intimate and far more chilling. The poison hadn't come from an external enemy. It came from one of his own bodyguards. His name was Lieutenant Seydou Karambiri, age 31, decorated, disciplined, and embedded deep within Traoré's personal security unit for almost 2 years. He had served tea countless times, stood silent behind doors during critical strategy meetings, escort missions, state dinners. No one suspected him. Until the money surfaced. A $1 million wire transfer, sent in 3 batches to an offshore account in Lome, Togo, was flagged by a Burkinabe financial analyst tracing unusual movements linked to known terror funders. It was meant to disappear quietly. But someone made a mistake. They didn't realize the account's second holder had a connection to a woman being watched by internal security. Within hours, digital breadcrumbs led back to Seydou. He was arrested quietly. No struggle, no denial. Only one sentence: "I didn't think he'd survive." Under interrogation, he admitted everything. A terrorist cell operating from Mali had approached him 6 months earlier. They offered protection for his family, land, a life in the shadows, and $1 million. All he had to do was deliver the poison. He waited, patient, precise. And when the order came, he chose the night Traoré would be alone in the war room, unattended, focused, vulnerable. But what he didn't count on was Traoré's body. The captain had survived multiple battlefield injuries in the past, shrapnel, infection, dehydration, and had developed an unusual resistance to several compounds used in guerrilla warfare. His body fought back. His will refused death. And his nation waited. When Ibrahim Traoré awoke at dawn, the first thing he asked wasn't, "Who did this?" but, "How long have I been out?" Leadership, even from the edge of death. Within the day, Seydou's confession was made known only to top military officials. There would be no public trial, no media storm, no chance for his name to become a symbol. Traoré had one message: "We do not glorify betrayal. We erase it." But the incident changed everything. Security protocol was rebuilt from scratch. Every member of his inner circle was reevaluated. Trust, once assumed, now had to be earned daily. And the captain? He returned to work within 48 hours, pale, thinner, but sharper than ever. At a closed-door meeting with his commanders, he said, "If they must pay men to kill me, then we are hurting them more than we know." That night, he wrote one sentence in his journal. They offered him $1 million. I gave him my trust. One of us was overvalued. In the weeks that followed, nothing leaked. No press releases. But the military began conducting sweeping internal reforms. Intelligence operatives in Mali went silent, one by one. And in a remote prison outside Ouagadougou, Lieutenant Seydou Karambiri was never seen again. The nation never learned the full story, but whispers remained. In classrooms, students asked, "Is it true Captain Traoré was poisoned?" In markets, elders replied, "Yes, but even poison couldn't take him down." And across Africa, one message became legend. For $1 million, they tried to kill him, but he's worth far more than that, to all of us. 3 weeks after the poisoning, life in Ouagadougou seemed to return to its rhythm. But something had shifted beneath the surface, subtle, unspoken, but undeniable. In schools, children whispered about the night the captain fell. In mosques and churches, his name had been added to prayer lists, not because he was gone, but because he was still here. In a dusty village on the outskirts of Koudougou, an old man sat before a small radio, listening to state broadcasts with tears silently running down his cheeks. "They took our gold," he muttered. "They tried to take our son, too." At the presidential residence, the walls had been repainted, the war room disinfected, and the tea protocol quietly rewritten. But Ibrahim Traoré had not returned to the same chair. He chose a smaller office, closer to the courtyard, where sunlight reached his desk by 6 a.m., and children could be heard laughing outside the fence. He now worked without layers of formality. No more closed doors unless absolutely necessary. He said, "If betrayal can grow in the shadows, then I will lead in the light." One morning, while reviewing agriculture reports, he received a handwritten letter from a 14-year-old girl in Dori. The envelope was wrinkled, the handwriting uneven. It read, "Dear Captain, I heard you almost died. Please don't, because when I draw the map of Africa at school, I always color Burkina Faso brighter than the others. Because of you." He didn't cry, but he kept the letter folded inside his pocket for days. That week, he personally visited 2 rural schools without media presence. No convoy, just him, his assistant, and one translator. In one of the classrooms, a boy asked him quietly, "Sir, were you scared when you drank the poison?" Traoré knelt beside him, looked him in the eye, and said, "I was scared of not having time to finish the work I promised you." The room fell silent, and in that silence, the myth grew. Not as a man who survived poison, but as a leader who remembered why he needed to survive. Across military ranks, reforms were no longer whispered, but demanded. Officers no longer asked who had been compromised. They asked how to ensure it would never happen again. Loyalty was no longer ceremonial. It had to be proven through service, sacrifice, and vigilance. A new creed was introduced at the academy. You do not protect the captain. You protect what he stands for. But perhaps the most profound change was invisible. It was in the way people now spoke of Traoré, not just as the captain, but as our shield. The betrayal had backfired. The $1 million attempt to kill him had, instead, carved his place deeper into the soul of the nation. From marketplace chants to street murals, from village songs to underground hip-hop verses, one phrase echoed. Poison touched his lips, but truth guards his soul. And deep within the presidential compound, on a quiet night when the stars burned low over Burkina Faso, Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood alone in the garden, eyes closed, breathing in the desert wind. He whispered a vow not to God, not to power, but to the invisible weight he carried. As long as they try to silence me with death, I will answer with life. As long as they put a price on my head, I will raise the value of my people. And if they ever come again, let them know this time we are ready. It was near midnight when the final report was delivered to Captain Traoré's desk, sealed, classified, and handwritten by his intelligence chief. It confirmed what he already knew in his gut. The $1 million bounty had originated not from a rogue faction, but from a network with deep roots, stretching across borders, carrying the scent of old empires and the fingerprints of modern proxy wars. He read the last line, "Traitors are planted when sovereignty blooms." He folded the paper, burned it quietly in the metal tray beside him, and stared out the window toward the sleeping capital. The lights of Ouagadougou flickered faintly in the distance, but to him they looked like the eyes of a nation, watching, waiting, believing. He did not summon his generals that night. He did not speak to his cabinet. Instead, he opened his notebook, wrote one sentence, and underlined it twice. Let this betrayal be the last planted in our soil. The next morning, without warning, he visited the grave of Thomas Sankara. Alone. No camera, no escort. Just a soldier and a promise. He stood there for a long time, then whispered, "They tried to end your dream with bullets. They tried to end mine with poison. But we are still here." And with that, he turned, walked back into the wind, and disappeared behind the gates of power, not as a victim of betrayal, but as a leader reborn through it. From that day forward, no one in Burkina Faso ever again questioned what Captain Traoré stood for, because he had survived what breaks most men and emerged not just alive, but untouchable. And so the whisper became a saying, the saying became a song, and the song became a legend. For $1 million, they tried to buy his death. But what they awakened was priceless.